300 years had passed since the Galactic Concord made its most terrible decision, and Ambassador Lyeth of the Thalori still felt the weight of that choice every time she looked at the star maps. She stood before the great observation window of Citadel Prime, the ancient space station that served as the heart of galactic civilization, and she watched the holographic display rotate slowly before her eyes. The galaxy spread out in brilliant colors of blue and gold and green, each shade representing the territories of different species, the trade routes that connected them, and the beacons that kept the peace. But one section of the map remained dark and gray, a vast spiral arm that stretched across thousands of light years and contained nothing but silence. The Orion Arm. Lyeth was a tall being with 4 graceful arms and skin that glowed with soft bioluminescence. Her people, the Thalori, were among the oldest members of the Concord, and they had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. They remembered the time before the darkness came, when the Orion Arm had been filled with life and promise. "You spend much time staring at that section of the map," said a voice behind her. Lyeth turned to see her aide, a young Thalori named Kevin, approaching with a data tablet in his hands. He was eager and bright, born long after the quarantine had been established, and he knew the Orion Arm only as a cautionary tale. "I remember when it was not gray," Lyeth replied, her voice soft with memory. "I remember when we traded with the species who lived there, when we watched their civilizations grow and flourish, when we believed they would one day join us among the stars." "The Vraxians changed everything," Kevin said. Yes, the Vraxians. Even speaking that name sent a chill through the station, for the Vraxian swarm was the greatest horror the galaxy had ever known. They were a parasitic hive-mind species that consumed everything in their path, and they had appeared without warning from the void between galaxies. No one knew where they came from or why they hungered so terribly, but their appetite was endless. They had swept through the Orion Arm like a plague, destroying colony after colony, devouring civilization after civilization. The Concord had sent fleets to stop them, but the Vraxians adapted to every weapon, countered every strategy, and overwhelmed every defense. Millions of soldiers had died trying to hold the line. In the end, the High Council had made the only choice they believed possible. They sealed the Orion Arm behind a network of interdiction beacons and quarantine stations, trapping the Vraxians inside, but also condemning everyone who remained. Billions of sentient beings had been left to die. Lyeth remembered the debates in the council chamber, the arguments that had lasted for weeks. She remembered the faces of the representatives who had pleaded for more time, more resources, another chance to save their people. And she remembered the final vote, when the majority had chosen survival over hope. "We did what we had to do," she whispered, but the words felt hollow even now. Among those abandoned had been a young species on a small blue planet called Earth. The Thalori had been monitoring them for generations, watching as they developed crude technologies and dreamed of reaching the stars. They had been curious and inventive, stubborn and resourceful, and they had shown remarkable promise. But when the quarantine fell, they had not yet achieved faster-than-light travel. They were trapped in their home system, unable to flee, unable to call for help, with the Vraxian swarm spreading ever closer. "What do you think happened to them?" Kevin asked, following her gaze to the gray section of the map. "The humans, I mean." "The same thing that happened to everyone else in the Orion Arm," Lyeth said. "The Vraxians consumed them, just as they consumed the Velthari and the Morath and the Syndicate of Kelos. Nothing survives the swarm." It was the accepted truth throughout the galaxy. The Orion Arm was dead, and all who had lived there were gone forever. 300 years of silence had confirmed what everyone already knew. Far across the galaxy, in the militarized zone that bordered the quarantine, Admiral Vorath of the Kethra was receiving reports that would shatter that certainty. The Kethra were a reptilian species, fierce warriors, who had fought their way into Concord membership through strength and cunning. They maintained the largest defensive fleet along the quarantine border, watching for any sign that the Vraxians might attempt to break through. For 3 centuries, their vigil had been uneventful. Until now. "Run the analysis again," Vorath growled, his clawed hands gripping the armrests of his command chair. "There must be an error in the sensors." His sensor officer, a young Kethra named Sirith, worked frantically at her console. She had checked the readings 5 times already, and each time they showed the same impossible result. "The signatures are genuine, Admiral," she said, her voice trembling. "I am detecting massive energy outputs from deep within the Orion arm. Thousands of distinct sources, all moving in coordinated patterns." "Vraxian?" "No, Admiral. Vraxian energy signatures are chaotic and organic. These readings are structured and technological. Someone is operating advanced vessels in the dead zone." Vorath rose from his chair, his scaled hide bristling with shock. In 300 years, nothing had emerged from the Orion arm. The Vraxians had consumed everything, leaving only silence and death. Or so they had believed. "Contact Citadel Prime," he ordered. "Tell the High Council that we have detected unknown vessels approaching the quarantine line. Tell them that something is coming out of the Orion arm." On Citadel Prime, the alarms began to sound for the first time in living memory. Ambassador Lyeth rushed through the corridors, her forearms pushing past crowds of confused officials. The command center was in chaos when she arrived, with technicians from a dozen species shouting at each other and pointing at displays that showed impossible data. High Arbiter Morath stood at the center of the room, his ancient crystalline body flickering with agitation. He was the leader of the Concord, a Scythian who had lived for over 1,000 years, and even he had never seen anything like this. "How many vessels?" he demanded. "Over 2,000 confirmed," a Veloth technician reported, his tentacles quivering. "Possibly more. They are crossing the quarantine line in formation." "Are they Vraxian?" "Negative. The energy signatures do not match any Vraxian profile. These are artificial vessels, built by a technological civilization." Lyeth pushed her way to the front of the crowd, her hearts pounding. 2,000 vessels was a massive fleet, larger than anything the Concord could deploy on short notice. Where had they come from, and what did they want? "Can we identify them?" Morath asked. The technician hesitated, his face pale. "We are receiving transmissions from the lead vessel. The language is in our databases." "Which language?" "English, High Arbiter. The human language." The command center fell silent. Every being in the room turned to stare at the display, where the fleet of impossible ships continued its advance toward Concord space. The humans were supposed to be dead. The entire Orion arm was supposed to be dead. But someone was coming, and they were coming in force. Ambassador Lyeth felt something she had not experienced in 300 years. The galaxy had believed the Orion arm was lost, had mourned its passing, and moved on with their lives. Now the dead were returning, and nothing would ever be the same. Admiral Damel Cortez stood on the bridge of the carrier vessel Endurance, with his hands clasped behind his back, and his eyes fixed on the stars ahead. Behind him, the crew worked at their stations with the quiet efficiency of veterans, their voices a steady murmur of reports and confirmations. They had trained for this moment their entire lives, and now it was finally here. The bridge was a vast chamber, filled with holographic displays and tactical screens, every surface showing some aspect of the fleet that followed in their wake. 2,347 vessels, ranging from massive dreadnoughts that bristled with weapons, to sleek destroyers built for speed and precision. This was the United Earth Fleet, the greatest military force humanity had ever assembled. "Admiral, we are approaching the quarantine boundary," reported Commander Katie Morrison from her station. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, a veteran of the Vraxian Wars who had served under 3 different admirals before Cortez. Sensors detect multiple alien vessels on the far side, holding position. They have noticed us, Cortez said, and a thin smile crossed his weathered face. I imagine they are quite surprised. 300 years ago, humanity had been a young species, barely beginning to explore their own solar system. They had known nothing of the Vraxians or the Galactic Concord, or the vast civilization that existed beyond their little corner of the galaxy. They had been innocent and hopeful, dreaming of the stars without understanding the dangers that lurked among them. Then the Vraxians came, and everything changed. The first attacks had been devastating. Earth's outer colonies fell within months, their populations consumed by the endless hunger of the swarm. Mars held out for 3 years before the defenses collapsed. The orbital stations around Jupiter were overrun in a single terrible week. Humanity had been pushed back to Earth itself, their backs against the wall, facing an enemy that had destroyed dozens of civilizations before them. And they had refused to die. Open a channel to all ships, Cortez ordered. The communications officer nodded and activated the fleet-wide broadcast. Every vessel in the Armada would hear his words, from the smallest patrol craft to the mighty dreadnoughts that formed the backbone of their formation. This is Admiral Cortez, he began, his voice steady and calm. For 300 years we have fought alone. The galaxy abandoned us, sealed us away, and left us to be consumed by the swarm. They believed we would die like all the others before us. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle over his crews. They were wrong. We did not die. We learned to fight, to adapt, to survive. We became something stronger than we ever imagined possible. And now, we have won. The Vraxians are destroyed, their swarm broken and scattered, their threat ended forever. Cheers erupted across the fleet, the sound of thousands of voices raised in triumph. Cortez allowed himself a moment to share in their pride before continuing. Today we crossed the boundary that kept us imprisoned. Today we announce to the galaxy that humanity still lives. Hold your heads high, my friends. We have earned our place among the stars. Commander Morrison watched the Admiral with quiet admiration. She had served with him for 15 years, through some of the bloodiest campaigns of the war, and she had never seen him waver. He was the rock that held the fleet together, the leader who inspired them to achieve the impossible. Admiral, said Lieutenant Commander Nathan Park from the intelligence station, we are being scanned by the alien vessels. They appear to be running our energy signatures through their databases. Let them look, Cortez replied. They will find nothing that matches their records. We are something new. The fleet crossed the quarantine line in perfect formation, thousands of ships moving as one. The interdiction beacons that had kept them trapped for centuries flickered and died as human engineers disabled them with contemptuous ease. On the far side of the boundary, the Kethra fleet watched in stunned silence. Admiral Vorath stood on the bridge of his flagship, his reptilian eyes fixed on the display. He had expected many things when he received the report of unknown vessels, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. Their ships are unlike anything in our databases, Sirith reported, her voice filled with awe. The weapon systems alone are generations ahead of anything in the Concord, and their shields appear to operate on principles we do not understand. How is this possible? Vorath demanded. The humans had primitive technology when the quarantine was established. They should not have been able to develop such vessels. 300 years is a long time, Admiral, and they have clearly had strong motivation to advance. Vorath studied the approaching fleet with the eye of a warrior. He recognized the formation they maintained, the way their ships covered each other, and created overlapping fields of fire. These were veterans, soldiers who had fought and won countless battles. Contact the lead vessel, he ordered. Ask them their intentions." The response came quickly, and Vorath found himself looking at the face of Admiral Cortez. The human was older than he expected, with lines of experience etched into his features, and eyes that had seen too much death. "I am Admiral Daniel Cortez of the United Earth Fleet," the human said. "We mean you no harm, provided you mean none to us. We are here to announce that the Vraxian threat has been eliminated, and to request diplomatic contact with your galactic concord." "Eliminated?" Vorath repeated. "You claim to have destroyed the swarm?" "We do not claim anything. We state a fact. The Vraxians are gone, their hive minds shattered, their breeding grounds sterilized. It took us 3 centuries, but we finished the job." Vorath felt something he had not experienced in many years: uncertainty. The Vraxians had been the greatest terror the galaxy had ever known, and this single species claimed to have defeated them alone. "How?" he asked. Cortez smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Through sacrifice, Admiral, through blood and fire, and the stubborn refusal to accept defeat. We learned to fight them, to adapt our tactics and weapons to counter their every strategy. We paid a terrible price, but in the end, we won." Back on the Endurance, Commander Morrison watched the exchange with mixed emotions. She remembered the stories her grandmother had told her. Tales of the early days when humanity still hoped for rescue from the stars. That hope had died long ago, replaced by grim determination and the will to survive. "Do you think they will believe us?" asked Park. "Does it matter?" Morrison replied. "We are not here to convince them of anything. We are here because the war is over, and we finally have the freedom to explore beyond our borders." The fleet continued its advance, spreading out to demonstrate the full scope of its numbers. Let the Concord see what humanity had built in the darkness, what they had forged in the fires of endless war. Admiral Cortez ended his transmission with Vorath and turned to face his bridge crew. These men and women had given everything for this moment, had sacrificed their youth and their innocence and their peace of mind. They deserved to see it through. "Set course for their capital station," he ordered. "It is time we met the rest of the galaxy." The Endurance surged forward, and the fleet followed in its wake. They had been alone for 300 years, fighting and dying and struggling to survive. They had been abandoned by a galaxy that thought them already dead. Now they were going to show that galaxy exactly what they had missed. The humans had not only survived, they had become something more powerful than anyone could have imagined. And they were done hiding in the shadows of the Orion arm. The universe would remember this day for a very long time. The council chamber at Citadel Prime had never been so silent. 12 species sat in the great circular hall, their representatives arranged in a ring around the central platform, where a holographic image flickered and stabilized. The image showed a human, the first living human any of them had seen in 3 centuries, and his presence changed everything they thought they knew about the universe. Admiral Daniel Cortez stood with his hands at his sides and his chin held high. He wore the dark blue uniform of the United Earth Fleet, decorated with medals and ribbons that told the story of a lifetime at war. His face was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of all he had witnessed. High Arbiter Morath leaned forward on his crystalline throne, his ancient mind struggling to process what he was hearing. "You claim to have eliminated the entire Vraxian species, a threat that brought the Concord itself to the edge of extinction." "I do not claim it," Cortez replied. "I tell you what happened. The Vraxians invaded our space 300 years ago. They destroyed our colonies, killed billions of our people, and pushed us to the brink of annihilation. But we did not surrender, and we did not die." Ambassador Lyeth listened with growing amazement. She had studied the records from before the quarantine, had seen the assessment of human capabilities that her predecessors had compiled. The humans had been a promising species, yes, but they had been primitive by galactic standards. They had not even developed faster than light travel. "How did you accomplish this?" she asked, her luminescent skin flickering with curiosity. "The Vraxians adapted to every weapon we deployed against them. They learned from every battle and became stronger." "So did we," Cortez said simply. "Every time they adapted, we found new ways to kill them. Every time they evolved, we evolved faster. We developed weapons that disrupted their hive-mind coordination, biological agents that targeted their reproduction, tactics that exploited weaknesses they did not know they had." Admiral Vorath of the Kethra rose from his seat, his scaled hide bristling with a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. "You expect us to accept that a single species accomplished what the combined might of the Concord could not?" Cortez turned to face the reptilian warrior, and something hard entered his voice. "The combined might of the Concord never tried. You built your walls and hid behind them. You abandoned billions of sentient beings to die, while you protected yourselves." The accusation hung in the air like a blade. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, for they knew the truth of his words. "We had no choice," Morath said, though his voice lacked conviction. "The Vraxians were overpowering our defenses. If we had not established the quarantine, they would have consumed the entire galaxy. Perhaps, or perhaps if you had stood and fought, we could have defeated them together 3 centuries ago. We will never know, will we?" Lyeth felt a deep shame settle into her heart. She had been young when the quarantine was established, but she had supported the decision. She had believed it was the only way to save galactic civilization. But now, looking at this human who had fought and won where they had retreated and hidden, she wondered if they had simply been cowards. "What do you want from us?" Morath asked. "Why have you come here?" Cortez was silent for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had softened. "We want to establish diplomatic relations, to open trade routes, to join the larger galactic community. We have spent 300 years at war, High Arbiter. Our people are tired. They deserve a chance to live without fear." "And your fleet?" Vorath demanded. "You bring over 2,000 warships to our border and speak of peace?" "We bring our fleet because we learned a hard lesson. When the Vraxians came, we were weak and unprepared. We trusted that someone would help us, that the universe would not let us die alone. That trust cost us billions of lives." Cortez met the Kethra's eyes without flinching. "We will never be weak again, and we will never again trust our survival to others." The words carried a warning that no one in the chamber could miss. The humans had been abandoned once, and they would not forget. They came seeking friendship, but they were prepared for hostility. On the Endurance, Commander Morrison watched the proceedings through a secure feed. Beside her stood Captain Lisa Navarro, the fleet's chief diplomatic officer, a woman who had spent her career preparing for this exact moment. "He is doing well," Navarro observed, "firm but not aggressive, making our position clear without threatening them directly." "Do you think they will accept us?" Morrison asked. Navarro considered the question carefully. "Some will. The Thalori ambassadors seemed sympathetic, and a few others appeared genuinely curious about us. But there will be resistance. We represent a challenge to everything they believed about themselves and their place in the universe. Because we survived when they expected us to die, they have spent 3 centuries telling themselves that the quarantine was necessary, that there was no other option, that they did the right thing. Our existence proves them wrong, and that is difficult for anyone to accept." Back in the council chamber, the debate continued for hours. Representatives from various species asked questions, challenged claims, and demanded proof of the Vraxian defeat. Cortez answered them all with patience and precision, providing sensor logs, battle records, and detailed accounts of the long war. When he described the siege of Mars, where human forces had held out for 18 years against overwhelming odds, several council members wept. When he explained how they had developed the neural disruptor that finally broke the Vraxian hive mind, the scientists in the audience leaned forward with intense interest. "You could have fled," Lyeth said quietly during a break in the formal proceedings. "When you developed faster-than-light travel, you could have abandoned your worlds and escaped into the galaxy. Why did you stay and fight?" Cortez looked at her with something like pity. "Where would we have gone? The Concord had sealed us in. And even if we could have escaped, we would not have left our home. Earth is more than just a planet to us. It is who we are. We would rather die defending it than live as refugees begging for scraps from those who abandoned us." The words struck Lyeth like a physical blow. Her people had abandoned their original homeworld millennia ago when it became uninhabitable. They had seen it as a practical decision, a necessary sacrifice. But the humans had chosen differently, and their choice had made them stronger. As the session drew to a close, High Arbiter Morath rose to deliver the Council's preliminary response. "Admiral Cortez, your presence here is unprecedented. We need time to verify your claims and to discuss the implications of your survival. But I believe I speak for the entire Council when I say that we welcome the opportunity for dialogue." Cortez nodded respectfully. "We ask only for the chance to prove ourselves. We are not your enemies, High Arbiter. We never were. But we are also not the helpless primitives you abandoned 3 centuries ago. We have earned our place among the stars, and we intend to claim it." The holographic image faded, and the council chamber erupted in furious discussion. The humans had returned from the dead, bringing with them technology and military power that rivaled anything the Concord possessed. The diplomatic station hung in the space between stars, a neutral ground where 2 civilizations could meet without the threat of weapons or the weight of history. Ambassador Lyeth walked through the corridors with Captain Lisa Navarro at her side. The 2 women having formed an unlikely friendship over the past weeks of negotiations. The Thalori was fascinated by the humans, by their strange mixture of warmth and steel, their ability to laugh and joke even while discussing the darkest chapters of their history. "Your people confuse me," Lyeth admitted as they paused before a viewing window. "You have every reason to hate us. We left you to die, and you suffered terribly because of our cowardice. Yet you seek friendship instead of revenge." Navarro smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. "Hatred takes energy, Ambassador. It consumes you from the inside, makes you bitter and small. We spent 300 years fighting for our survival. We do not have the strength left for grudges. But surely you feel anger? Of course we do. My grandmother lost her entire family in the fall of Proxima. My father never knew his parents because they died defending a colony that no longer exists. I grew up in bunkers, learning to strip and clean weapons before I learned to read." Navarro's voice remained steady, but her hands tightened at her sides. "We carry our anger like we carry our scars, Ambassador. It is part of who we are, but we choose not to let it control us." Lyeth considered these words carefully. Her people were ancient, and they had learned to suppress their emotions over millennia of civilization. But the humans seemed to embrace their feelings, to acknowledge them openly, while still maintaining control. "How do you do it?" she asked. "How do you hold all that pain and still reach out to us?" "Because the alternative is worse. If we let ourselves be consumed by hatred, we become something ugly and broken. The Vraxians took so much from us already. We refuse to let them take our humanity as well." In another section of the station, Admiral Vorath of the Kethra sat across from Admiral Cortez in a small conference room. The 2 warriors had requested a private meeting, away from the politics and diplomacy that dominated the main negotiations. "I have studied your war records," Vorath said, his reptilian eyes fixed on the human. "The campaigns you fought, the battles you won, the sacrifices you made. The siege of Mars alone should have been impossible. 17 years against constant Vraxian assault." 18 years, Cortez corrected quietly. "I lost my mother in the final assault, on the last day before relief arrived." Vorath was silent for a moment. The Kethra understood loss and sacrifice. They were a warrior species, and they honored those who fell in battle. "Your people are remarkable," he said finally. "We considered ourselves the greatest warriors in the Concord, but what you accomplished puts our achievements to shame." Cortez shook his head. "We did not fight because we wanted glory. We fought because we had no other choice. There was no one coming to rescue us, no alliance to call for aid. It was win or die, and we chose to win." "And now that you have won, what does humanity want?" "We want what any species wants. Peace for our people, security for our worlds, a future for our children." Cortez leaned back in his chair and allowed himself a rare moment of vulnerability. "We have been at war for 3 centuries, Admiral. Entire generations have known nothing but conflict. They deserve a chance to live normal lives. But you keep your fleet at full strength. Because we learned what happens when you trust others to protect you. The Concord abandoned us, and billions died because we were unprepared. We will never make that mistake again." Vorath nodded slowly. He understood that logic. The Kethra maintained their own powerful fleet for similar reasons, never trusting fully in alliances or promises. "My people respect strength," he said. "We will support your admission to the Concord, if that is what you seek." "We appreciate that, but we do not seek admission as supplicants, Admiral. We come as equals, with our own terms and our own conditions. We will not submit to any authority that does not recognize our sovereignty." Back on Earth, in the rebuilt city of Geneva, President Michel Torres addressed the United Human Congress. The Great Hall was filled with representatives from every human world, every colony and station and outpost that had survived the long war. "My fellow humans," she began, her voice carrying across the chamber, "we stand at a turning point in our history. For 300 years we believed we were alone in the universe, fighting a war that no one else would fight. But today, we know the truth. There is a vast civilization beyond our borders, one that abandoned us to die, but now wishes to welcome us as partners." She paused, letting the weight of those words settle over her audience. "Some have asked why we should accept their friendship, why we should forgive those who left us to suffer. They argue that we should demand reparations, that we should use our military advantage to punish them for their cowardice." Torres shook her head firmly. "That is not who we are. The war changed us, yes. It made us stronger, harder, more dangerous. But it did not make us cruel. It did not make us tyrants. We fought to survive, not to conquer. And now that we have survived, we will build something better." Cheers erupted through the chamber, and Torres allowed herself a small smile. "We will engage with the Galactic Concord as equals. We will trade with them, learn from them, and share our own knowledge in return. But we will do so on our terms, with our dignity intact. We will never forget what we endured, and we will never let anyone diminish our sacrifices." She raised her fist in the air, and the Congress rose to its feet in thunderous applause. Humanity endures, humanity survives, and now humanity will thrive. On the diplomatic station, Navarro and Lyeth watched a recording of the speech together. The Thalori ambassador was moved by the passion in Torres's words, by the fierce pride that radiated from every human in that chamber. "Your people are truly remarkable," Lyeth said quietly. "You have every right to be bitter and angry, yet You choose hope instead. Hope is what kept us alive, Navarro replied. When everything seemed lost, when the Vraxians were at our gates and our worlds were burning, we held on to hope. Hope that tomorrow would be better, that our children would see a brighter future, that all our suffering would mean something. She turned to face the alien ambassador, her eyes bright with emotion. That hope is the most human thing about us, Ambassador. It is what makes us who we are. And now, for the first time in 300 years, that hope has a chance to become reality. Lyeth reached out with one of her 4 hands and gently touched Navarro's shoulder. It was a gesture of respect, of acknowledgement, of something that might one day grow into friendship. Then let us build that reality together, she said. Let us make sure your sacrifices were not in vain. And in that moment, on a small station floating in the void between civilizations, the future began to take shape. 5 years had passed since the human fleet crossed the quarantine line, and the galaxy would never be the same. Ambassador Ryan Chen stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic station that orbited Earth, watching the blue planet turn slowly below. Ships filled the sky around him, vessels from a dozen different species coming and going in an endless dance of commerce and diplomacy. Where once there had been silence and isolation, now there was life and connection. It is beautiful, said Ambassador Lyeth, standing beside him with her luminescent skin glowing softly in the starlight. I understand now why your people fought so hard to protect it. Earth is more than just a planet to us, Chen replied. It is the world that made us, that shaped us, that we almost lost 1,000 times during the war. Every mountain and ocean and forest carries the memory of what we survived. The Galactic Concord had been transformed by humanity's arrival. Human technology, shared freely despite everything that had happened, had revolutionized medicine and agriculture and defense throughout the galaxy. Human diplomats, with their strange talent for finding common ground between different species, had helped resolve conflicts that had festered for centuries. And human warships, stationed at strategic points throughout Concord space, provided a security that the galaxy had not known in ages. The Council has formally voted to dissolve the quarantine protocols, Lyeth said. The Orion arm will be fully integrated into Concord space within the next decade. Your colonies will have access to all the benefits of membership. Admiral Cortez will be pleased. He has been pushing for full integration since the beginning. How is the Admiral? I heard he finally retired. Chen smiled warmly. He did. After 50 years of service, he decided it was time to let younger officers take command. He teaches at the Naval Academy on Luna now, training the next generation of leaders. Does he find peace in that work? I think so. The war took so much from him, from all of us. Teaching allows him to give something back, to help young people build the future, instead of just surviving the present. Lyeth was quiet for a moment, her thoughts drifting to the long conversations she had shared with Cortez over the years. The human admiral was a complex man, shaped by tragedy and triumph in equal measure. He carried his burdens with dignity, never complaining, never seeking sympathy. Your people have taught us a great deal, she said finally, not just in technology or tactics, but in spirit. We had become complacent, hiding behind our walls and pretending that darkness would never reach us. You showed us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to stand and fight despite it. We had no other choice, Chen replied. When the Vraxians came, we could not run and we could not hide. All we could do was fight, and so we fought. It was not bravery, it was survival. Perhaps, but the choice to keep fighting, year after year, generation after generation, when everything seemed hopeless, that is something special. That is something we had forgotten how to do. Down on Earth, in the memorial gardens that surrounded every major city, People walked among the monuments to the fallen. Names were carved into stone, billions of them, stretching across vast parks and plazas. Each name represented a life lost, a sacrifice made, a piece of humanity that would never be recovered. Admiral Daniel Cortez, retired, but never truly at rest, stood before a particular section of the wall. The names here belonged to the soldiers who had died in the final assault on Mars, the battle that had finally broken the Vraxian siege after 18 terrible years. One name stood out among the rest, Captain Sarah Cortez. "Hello, Mom," he said quietly. "I brought some of my students today. I thought you might like to meet them." Behind him stood a group of young cadets, humans and aliens mixed together in a way that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. They watched their instructor with a mixture of respect and curiosity, understanding that this moment was sacred. "These young people are the future," Cortez continued. "They will never know the war the way we did, and I am grateful for that. But they will carry our memory forward. They will remember what we sacrificed and why." He touched the name on the wall one final time, then turned to face his students. "The galaxy believed we were lost," he said, his voice carrying across the memorial. "They wrote us off as dead and moved on with their lives, but we survived. We fought and bled and died, and in the end, we won. Never forget that. Never let anyone tell you that the impossible cannot be achieved." The cadets stood at attention, absorbing his words. They came from different worlds and different species, but they were united by a common purpose, to protect the peace that so many had died to create. "Remember this place," Cortez told them. "Remember these names. They are not just casualties. They are heroes. Every one of them chose to stand against the darkness, and because of their sacrifice, we are here today." On the observation deck above Earth, Chen and Lyeth watched the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. The light painted the clouds in shades of gold and crimson, a reminder that even after the darkest night, dawn always came. "What do you think the future holds?" Lyeth asked. Chen considered the question carefully. "I think we have a chance to build something better. Humanity and the Concord working together can accomplish things neither could achieve alone. But it will not be easy. There will be challenges, disagreements, moments when old wounds threaten to tear us apart. And when those moments come, we will remember why we fought. Not for revenge or conquest, but for the chance to live in peace. We will remember the billions who died so that we could stand here today. And we will find a way forward, because that is what humans do." Lyeth smiled, her luminescent skin glowing brighter. "That is what I admire most about your species. Your stubborn refusal to give up, even when everything seems impossible. It is a quality that could change the galaxy." "It already has," Chen replied. 5 years ago we were alone and forgotten. Today we are part of something larger, something that could last for millennia. That is not a small thing." Ships continued to move across the sky, carrying goods and people and dreams between the stars. The quarantine was over, the Vraxians were gone, and humanity had taken its place among the great civilizations of the galaxy. They had not forgotten their suffering, and they never would. The scars of war remained etched into their culture, their history, their very souls. But they had chosen to use that pain as fuel for something better, to transform their trauma into triumph. The galaxy had believed the Orion arm was lost. They had been wrong. Humanity endured, humanity survived, and now humanity would help lead the galaxy into a new age of hope and possibility. The sun set over Earth, but in the darkness, countless stars began to shine. Each one a reminder that even in the blackest night, light could be found. And somewhere among those stars, the children of Earth looked toward the future with eyes full of wonder. The war was over.